Okay. Happy New Year. This is the Gita in Action podcast. And I think as we're progressing through, it'll make more and more sense why it's called the Gita in Action podcast. So keep that in mind today, especially. And I'm Radha Priti, your host, and I'm here with a family of seekers. Brittany Payne just joined us. Welcome, Brittany Payne. Good to see you. And we are making our way through the Gita. We are in chapter 3, text 16, and we are talking about sacrifice. We have one more verse in that section, and then we're going to move on to a different section. So actually, today's theme might be a little bit different than what it's been the past couple classes, but we'll start there. We'll start chapter 3, text 16. And for those of you who want to join us live, we do this Monday, Thursdays at 8 a.m., which actually I should say I'm gonna have to change to 7:30 because my husband goes back to work next week and we have to move it earlier so that he can still watch my daughter. So that's an announcement for the day. After today, we'll have to move this to 7:30. But we do this now every Monday, Thursday, 7:30 a.m., 7:30 to 8:30. And you can go to our Seekers Quest Instagram, Seekers Quest 108, go to the bio, and there's links to join the WhatsApp group. So you can join us on Zoom and all the good things. So that's our housekeeping. I hope you guys can all still come at 7:30. Can anybody not come at 7:30 that's on right now? Raise your hand if you can't come at 7:30. It'd be so sad if our group, if people couldn't come anymore. Okay, well, nobody's raising their hand, so this is a good sign. Okay, so let's get right into it here. Text 16, chapter 3. Second, let me pull up database. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yes? Okay, great. So, is this chapter 3? Chapter 2. Chapter 3, 16 says, My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. So, like I said, we're continuing on this theme of sacrifice that we talked about before. This is the last verse of that section. And this text is pretty much the opposite of the work hard, play hard kind of a mantra, cultural mantra that we hear going around quite often. Krishna's here saying that if you want to enjoy the material world, sacrifice is necessary. He's saying that life becomes meaningless, not because of life's problems, but because of life's pleasures. And if we think about that a little bit, when we have, like, if we have lots of problems and we run away from our problems, what he's saying here is it really doesn't make us any happier. But when we're kind of overindulging on pleasures and we become a little bit more disciplined, in the long run, it makes us happier. And again, a lot of us have experienced that, maybe getting kind of tired of some of the material pleasures that we thought brought us happiness, or material things that we thought brought us happiness, like a job or money or a house or things like that we kind of spent a lot of time chasing and then realized this isn't really all that it's cracked up to be, right? And also, sometimes when people have kids, you have to give up a lot of pleasures when you have kids. Like this year, New Year's Eve for me was much different than any New Year's Eve. Not that I really went out like in a party kind of thing for New Year's Eve in the past, but even so, just like socializing and kind of just looking for pleasure myself. It was a whole different thing being home with a 1-month-old and just like feeding her and sleeping. But it was like so fulfilling at the same time, right? It was like I didn't even miss doing anything else because it was so fulfilling, just like making that sacrifice, having something bigger than myself to take care of. But having kids creates a whole lot more problems for you. It's not like, in fact, that was a reason like that I was like, why would I want to have kids? It's just going to create all these other attachments and problems and complicate life. And it totally does. It totally does. But it makes life so meaningful in a way that I hadn't really experienced before. So that's an example in the material world. But when we zoom out again to our spiritual relationship, when we can live for a purpose bigger than ourselves, serving Krishna and serving others in relationship with Krishna, we find enriched meaning that makes life's problems bearable, right? And that's, again, we all experience that. And if you don't have kids, you still probably have something in your life that's bigger than you, that you're committed to, that makes the problems okay. Like you'll endure some obstacles because of the meaning that you feel in the work that you're doing. I remember feeling that same kind of way when I worked for the Department of Defense for the Navy, when I was an engineer for a contractor of the Navy. I felt that same kind of way, like it's something bigger than myself. It was much more to me than just like making money. In fact, like I could have made a lot more money in a private company, but doing something like that, I felt like a sense of like a higher calling kind of thing. And I felt that with all the people that I worked with too, which was really nice. And it was nice too, like being a manager and trying to motivate people for something higher than themselves, because it kind of brought everybody together in a way that when everybody's just acting selfishly for themselves, it kind of inspires more like competition kind of feeling. But when people are committed to like a mission or something, it has a way of uniting people. So this is where meaning is found in life. This is where the happiness is found in life, not by getting rid of problems or, it's not that we want problems, but this is really where the nectar is. Narayani says, my guru told me how you asked. Oh, I'm not going to read that out loud. Thank you, though. Okay. I'm just not reading out loud because it's about me and it doesn't need to be. Thank you, though. You're sweet. Okay, so we outgrow the idea. Hopefully, we outgrow the idea that most of the pleasure in this world exists in the form of sense gratification, and we want to care for something bigger than ourselves. Right. And in this verse, Krishna says if someone is not participating in the cosmic cycle, Krishna gives three consequences. One, it's a life of wrong. And this sounds kind of harsh, but again, if we could kind of try to understand the essence of what he's saying here and relate to it, we can see that it's kind of true, right? So he's saying the three consequences if we're not participating in the cosmic cycle. He says life of wrongdoing. He says we're just living for sense pleasure, and it's a waste. And again, I mean, how many of us want, like, when we think about our funerals or our gravestone, just like had a really happy, great life, right? Like we all aspire to have contributed in some bigger way that is profound for people, that people remember us for, right? So when we think about that, it kind of makes sense. It's like, what are we doing with our lives? We've been given this gift and we're just running around looking to get some kind of short-term satisfaction. What does that really do for us? Right? Or, the higher order of society, what to speak of our relationship with God and the cosmic arrangement. So the Gita started with Arjuna confused about fight versus don't fight. Right. And then we talked about how Krishna expanded this Arjuna's vision into action. Like Arjuna was thinking that his only options were action or renunciation. And Krishna took that and expanded that into 5 levels that we talked about. So it wasn't just action or renunciation. These 5 levels, does anybody remember these 5 levels? Or 4 levels? It starts with sinless action or sinful action. Right. So then Then it goes to, we have attached action, we have detached action, we have premature renunciation, and we have mature renunciation. Right? So we have these four different levels. We have two kinds of action, detached and attached, and then two kinds of renunciation, premature and mature. Right? So Krishna will be talking about mature renunciation next, but here he's talking about detached action. Right? The key point is that Krishna is telling Arjuna to act. And the action itself can be at various levels, right? We can have various motives for our action. The motive can be sense pleasure, survival, power, success. But what Krishna is going to talk about here is the motive being more related to duty. Duty meaning to maintain harmony here, right? So it's again seeing something bigger than yourself, seeing that you're a part of this bigger cosmic arrangement and wanting to have this kind of reciprocal relationship to with that kind of understanding, with that level of consciousness to give back. Right. So this isn't the same as when Krishna was telling Arjuna all these reasons to fight, like you'll go to heaven, you'll you'll get rid of your sinful reactions, like all of these things that were kind of just related to him. Now it's kind of the vision is kind of expanding into his relationship with the whole, with the collective. Right. So it's also not the same as earlier when Krishna said that we need to work to maintain ourselves. So if we remember that justification in 3:8, Krishna says you need to work to maintain yourself. This is actually kind of expanding that, saying that we need to do work to sacrifice to please the gods who provide necessities for life. Right. So it's kind of elaborated further. It's not just about me. I need to work to maintain myself. It's you need to work so that you can participate functionally, harmoniously with the cosmic arrangement, with what's going on around us, right? So the sacrifice is required to maintain the world order even now. And this is a more evolved mindset than some of those other reasons that Krishna was throwing at Arjuna that were again more me-centered, more how am I going to see it directly benefit me? It was like just me in a bubble, right? Like I'm going to go to heaven, I'm going to get a kingdom, I'm gonna, all these things that's just about me. Now it's kind of tying him in this collaborative relationship, which is a higher level of consciousness. If we can again get outside of our ego, think outside of that, make it more about not just about me, but about my role and my responsibility. It's a higher level of consciousness. So that's what Krishna's doing here. He's bringing Arjuna up the scale, again, meeting him where he's at and trying to bring him up to higher levels of consciousness. And this is what he's doing for us too with the Gita. Right? So wherever we are, whatever our desire is, we can start. He'll give us somewhere to start and bring us up. So when we think about some of that, like a mindset that's just focused on me, like how am I going to reap a reward? It's more of like a reward-based system. Right? Like if a kid gets a certain grade on an exam, then he can go out on an outing with a friend or something like that. But if the kid becomes aware that for his education, the parents have had to make all these sacrifices, have had to take out loans or, have had to rearrange their schedules such that he can go to this special school or, if he can understand that and because of that work hard, because he understands that his parents have made such sacrifices for him, this is a much more evolved version. Right? Because one is more aware of how things really work and their relationship with that. So again, we see this, this example demonstrates exactly how we see this in our material existence, in our relationships, in our work lives. If the more that we can kind of understand, the consequences of our actions to other people and try to function in harmony with that, trying to minimize harm to others and the world around us and try to be, a light for that, try to contribute in a positive way, really the more connected and fulfilled that we feel and the more meaningful that our relationships become. And this is the same thing in our spiritual life with our relationship with God and our relationship with, the cosmic arrangement, like offering our food, understanding that our food doesn't come from us, that it comes from a higher arrangement and trying to reciprocate with that accordingly. So this consciousness that there are higher realities maintaining us, now leads us to approach higher realities with a greater sense of gratitude. So this brings us to this 4 levels of which higher realities can be approached. And these 4 levels, again, can be applied to your personal relationships as well. And that may, again, be the easiest way to understand them because it's not so natural for us to think about approaching God like this because we don't have as much practice, honestly, as we do in these relationships in the material existence. So we can start there and then we can kind of try to extrapolate and understand more broadly how this would apply in our relationship with God. So these 4 levels, the basic level is fear. We approach, hopefully they won't trouble me. So let me make them happy so they don't bother me, right? Or in a relationship, I don't, if anybody's been in a relationship and done things out of fear, like I'm afraid that they're going to get mad at me or they're not going to like me anymore, or they're going to leave me, right? I've definitely had motives because of that or done things because of that motive, right? So fear. The next higher, if we're going up the consciousness ladder, the next highest motive would be desire, right? If they'll give me something that I want, so then I'll do this for them. It's kind of like that transactional Amazon Prime we talked about. And when we talk about it as related to God, it's like karma kandis was the word. So that's in that desire, which is kind of like an exchange. They give me what I want, I give them what they want. The next highest, and this is where we are now, we're talking about duty, right? They've given me so much, let me reciprocate by offering something to them. This is has more responsibility, more humility. So that's the next level as we're evolving in our consciousness. And the same thing, you can see if you look at a marriage, again, or a relationship, you can see how this would play out. And then the highest would be love. So we have fear, desire, duty, love. And these are the ways that we can approach a relationship and a relationship with the divine. And the Gita is teaching us how to act depending on whatever level that we're at so that we can make progress and we could still satisfy our material desires. So those are the 4 levels: fear, desire, duty, love. And we're going to talk about those. Those are going to come up again in the subsequent verses. So it's kind of an interesting model for us to work with. The first 3 levels are concerned with gifts, the kind of concern that's kind of more concerned with what I'm going to get. The highest level is concerned with the gifter, right? Who's giving it to me. It's just this selfless love. This is where bhakti is, right? Bhakti is at this level. When we talk about bhakti, it's at this level. And this is more concerned with the gifter. So it's the highest. It's less concerned with me and more concerned with them. And in that way, it's the highest. We're able to completely step outside of ourselves, surrender all of our needs, expectations, wants for somebody else, for a higher being, or completely surrender that kind of control, and in that way, we're in that highest level of consciousness, which is love. And again, they say in this world that the most that we can experience that is the relationship of a mother with their child. And these mothers that are on the call probably experience this, the ability that you've probably never had in your life, like you do when you're a mother, to just completely let go of whatever you thought was important for yourself for the benefit of another being. And some kind of like special powers I feel like that mothers get, or they're able to do this. But that's again that's the highest. But what they say is that that's the highest we can experience in this life. But really, the ultimate highest is with God, and that's really where unconditional love exists. We get kind of glimpses of it in this life, and that can help us understand. But the highest relationship is with God, and it's there for us if we reach out for it. So that's the end of that section on sacrifice. That's 316. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on to the next one? Just saw Poppy hop on. Welcome, Poppy. It's good to see you again. Trevor, too. Welcome, Trevor and Denny. Okay, we'll move on to 317 then. 317 says, but for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. So the next three verses describe characteristics of people who don't have to perform their duty, who don't have to perform their duty because they're above the system, right? They've like escaped the system. Like we talked about a person in the army, since they've dedicated their lives to the nation responds appropriately, right? They can act like above the law kind of thing. And they're not escaping their duties, but they've grown to a point of being above and beyond the system. Their consciousness has grown to a point where they no longer need to work within that system, right? And this text describes someone who's fully satisfied within. So if someone is fully satisfied within, then they can work above the system, right? And this is a tall order. This is a person that is fully God conscious, and therefore they no longer have any duty to perform. All of their karma is cleared because all of their previous sacrifices, and they're just connected with God in pure consciousness, meaning like that's their only desire. There's no material affection or attachment that's going to affect them in any way. They're just 100% God conscious, right? They have no material desires, and therefore they no longer have obligations to the Vedic injunctions. They're not bound by duty. And this is because the purpose of the Vedas is to regulate material desires while developing God consciousness, right? It's saying wherever you are, here's a scale, wherever you are, pick it, and we'll tell you how to start to kind of have a reciprocal relationship with God so that we can learn and grow and evolve spiritually. But if you don't have any material desires, then there's no need. And you're just fully connected to God. And that's mature renunciation. And in this section, Krishna's going to start talking about that. So what we've been discussing up till this point is more broadly the subject of what Arjuna should do and why. Right? What he should do and why. Should he fight? Should he not? And why? And again, we talked about his motive for fighting. It could be material pleasures in this world, in the next world. Krishna threw out those reasons even for him to fight. If you fight, you'll get a kingdom in this world, and the next you'll get heaven. So there's no reason not to fight, if we remember that section. And then Krishna kind of evolves, the conversation evolves, and Krishna tells him, material welfare in this world, seeking harmony with the universe. It's another reason that you should fight. And that's another step up the ladder of consciousness, because it's not just about what he desires for him, it's about having harmony with the universe. And that's more of the duty, the duty level. Again, fear, desire, duty, love. So Krishna's kind of given him lots of different reasons, starting from desire, going up to duty. But the key principle here is that things are moving forward in terms of encouraging Arjuna to act, right? So he's moving up that ladder, encouraging him to act. The reasons are moving up that ladder of consciousness. So far, Krishna has expanded the options of action and renunciation. Again, we talked about these levels. He said that there could be selfish action. That's like materially motivated, attached action. Selfless action, which is what we call karma yoga. The title of this chapter, it's like detached yoga, or detached work. Sorry, I'm like struggling to find words today. And immature renunciation, we talked about that. That's like just running away from your problems. And then mature renunciation, which is what we're talking about now, when somebody has reached that level that they're fully satisfied within and they don't need anything around them to make them happy. They're just satisfied in their connection with God. That's mature renunciation. Immature is saying these problems in the material world are too big and I'm just not going to deal with it anymore. This is too frustrating, or I'm just not feeling it anymore, and I'm just not going to do it anymore. Right? That's different than really being fully God conscious. Krishna, though, is really just telling Arjuna that he should act. And Arjuna is saying, okay, well, if I'm not materially motivated, why can't I just give up work? Like if I'm not materially motivated, why can't I just give it up? And Krishna is saying, okay, if you're at that level, then even if you do work, you won't get entangled in it because you have no attachment to it. So whether you work or don't work, if you don't have any attachments, you won't get entangled. So why does it matter what you do? Therefore, it's better just to work. And this is the theme of the next section. This is where Krishna is going to take us in this next section. And Krishna uses lots of different, again, we've talked about Krishna uses lots of different reasonings through the past 3 chapters to bring Arjuna to the same conclusion. I guess 2 chapters rather, chapter 2 and 3. But these reasons, Krishna, he gives him lots of different reasons to fight. Again, depending on where his consciousness is, in efforts to bring him up, in efforts to show us, to demonstrate to us that wherever your consciousness is, you can have a relationship with God and reciprocate in some way and be kind of and perform your duty, basically. So let's go to this next section. This section will be talking about how Arjuna has a responsibility, and as a part of that responsibility, he needs to function harmoniously. And this is the essential point of sacrifice. And we've used the example a lot of taxes as a sacrifice, right? There could be various reasons that someone perform sacrifice: fear, desire, duty, love. Love is not so applicable, but maybe if we have a super good, inspiring leader and we just love the leader and we want to pay our taxes for that reason, we could maybe imagine that. But there's different reasons, again, that people perform sacrifice. Now Krishna is telling Arjuna that he needs to do his part to maintain world order. And that order could be at cosmic or national state level, but he needs to do his part to maintain the order. And again, we talked about this a little bit, that highest level being love. This is where bhakti is, just to kind of give you a precursor for where we're going, where we're going to see in chapters 6 through 12, what we're really going to see unfold when we get to the bhakti section, because this is the highest, this is love. And Krishna is going to teach us how to act at that level from wherever we are. And people could be, when we approach from the bhakti perspective, we talk about service. Service is generally at the level of love, and that's the highest. People could be doing it at lower levels, right? But if we use the word service in a bhakti context, it's usually not done with any material reciprocation, or that's our goal anyway. That's our aim. It's just motivated by love. But here, Krishna is talking more about the immediate worldview of Arjuna and how within that immediate worldview, he needs to fight. So if a person is spiritually evolved and materially desireless, then they have no obligations. But even such people that have no obligations, it makes no difference to them whether they work or not, right? So whether they are in this world or not in this world, because their consciousness is not in this world, they don't need anybody's shelter, right? If they've transcended bodily consciousness, they're not really concerned about functioning in this world. And we're all a part of something bigger than ourselves. And in that, we're taking and giving. But these people, they're not taking from that level, right? It makes no difference. So therefore, it makes no difference to them whether they give or not. So they're not engaged in that kind of reciprocal relationship because they don't need anything. They're just dependent on God, right? They're not aspiring. They don't need to like aspire to go out and do anything to get their food. They just depend on God. That's it. So that's why they kind of get a get out of jail free card for reciprocating, because they're not engaged in that kind of relationship, right? And because they're not attached, they can function equally with or without people. And that's what Krishna is going to focus on. This is mature renunciation. So this is such a tall order when we hear it like this. When we hear it like this and we think about how when we've tried to renounce things, it's like we're so far from actually that level of renunciation that if we've tried to renounce things, it's probably premature renunciation, and we probably need to take a deeper look into what we're running away from so that we can actually get over it, right? So Krishna is going to turn the argument back to Arjuna and say, if you're really detached, then it won't make any difference to you if you act, but it will make a difference to the world. And that's where we're going. Again, we're getting more and more out of this me-centered reality and more connected to the world around us and our contribution and what that means. And this is where we're going to start talking about being detached in your mind, right? Being detached in your mind, but still engaged in the work. And this is the action, the detached action. And this is for the benefit of the whole. So the consciousness is really evolving here. And we're seeing that grow. Does anybody want to share anything before we move on to the next verse? Is this resonating? Is this making sense to you guys? Okay, we'll move on to 18. Text 18. Text 18 says, a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. So this is another characteristic of a person who is immune from having to perform duties, right? We talked about they live kind of above the law. It's someone who's not dependent on anyone around them, right? They're only reliant on God. So the verse that we just talked about was somebody who's completely satisfied within. Now this verse is saying somebody who's not dependent on anybody around them, and they're only dependent on God. Therefore, they can operate above the law, right? The idea is that for those that are not taking anything from this world, they have no obligation to give back to anything to this world. And though such people are actually on their own, they can still actually act meaningfully. And that's the point here. Oh, Narayani said, I wanted to share, but I didn't just want to unmute myself. I waved, but you didn't say it. No, please share. I want to hear it because we just finished 318. So let's take a pause here and hear what you have to say. Please share.
It's not a lot. It's just that when um, Arjuna asks, or when Krishna says like, "Okay, let me explain this to you again," I feel that's something that we experience in our life as well. That somebody explains something and then we don't get it, and we have to ask again. And even though we also learn at some point that Arjuna he's perfect. He's like he's he's a perfected being. He's one of Krishna's permanent entourage. He's always with him in whatever incarnations. And yeah, he's always with Krishna. That the Bhagavad Gita is an instruction for us, and we also experience this like when you sit in a small group or in this bigger group, it doesn't matter, and somebody asks a question that somebody else in the audience might think, oh, I want to know that too. I didn't even know I have this question, but now I want to know the answer, and that's why I find it so relatable, you know, that we hear instructions and explanations from different sides because, I mean, for me, myself, it took me a really long time to even get the gist of the Gita.
Yeah.
That was-
No, that's so true. And the other thing is like depending on where we also experience like wherever we are, these truths hit us differently at different times, right? Like you could hear the same truth in different ways or at different times. And depending on where you are, it completely resonates differently. Or you're like, oh wow, I never thought about it like that. Or, now this is affecting my life differently. And we see Krishna doing that for Arjuna all through the Gita, where, it's kind of like a dartboard, and he's throwing darts at the reasons that he should fight, but he's doing it from all different angles so that wherever he is, it's still getting to that target. It's still saying fight, but he's approaching it from all different places to meet Arjuna wherever he is. If you have a material desire, if you want a greater kingdom, if you want to reach heaven in the next life, and now he's at this place of duty. If you want to act harmoniously with the universe around you, and wherever he is, he's encapsulating that. The answer is the same. You should fight. The target is the same, but here's all of the different reasons depending on where you are and where your consciousness is. And the same way again that we kind of see that with our kid, if with a child, when they're really young, maybe we can motivate them in one way, like with candy or, but as they get older, hopefully they start to understand that there's something bigger going on here, and they start to care more for their for that reciprocal relationship that they have with you, and they want to just please you, right? That's the goal, that we don't have to give them something so like short-sighted or so for them to reciprocate. And that's what God is trying to teach us. If we really believe in God, we're like the children of God, and he's trying to help us evolve our consciousness so that we can attain him, so that we can go back to God. but we have to learn these things, and we have to learn how to see it in broader perspective and see without acting in this way how really kind of selfish we become, self-centered that we become. And the beautiful thing is, if we can have this kind of relationship with God, it starts to have this trickle down effect into the rest of our lives. And we start to just be more appreciative and loving of people around us, right? And our whole life start to improve. Our relationships with people, our relationships with our spouse, our relationships with our colleagues, right? Because we're learning these principles and we're actually living them, right? So thank you. Thank you for sharing. So now we're on 319, and this is the last characteristic of people that are immune from the laws, right? That are higher than the laws. Therefore, without being attached to the fruit of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the supreme. So here the idea is that by working, one can progress towards spiritual perfection. Here, Krishna is specifying that, okay, if you have detachment and you are renounced, then this could lead to renunciation of action, right? You could say, okay, I'm not gonna do anything. And in this, you'll get some personal welfare and get some kind of liberation. Or he's saying you could renunciate inside your mind, but still act. So renunciation in action. So you can be renounced, but you can still be acting. And if you are detached, then stay detached, but act from that level for the purpose of the welfare of the world. So this is an even higher level of duty that he's talking about here, right? Where you're actually renounced. So you're not doing your duty because you're trying to reciprocate because you're in that collaborative relationship. Now you're renounced, right? You're completely renounced from anything. You're detached from the action, from the reaction of your action, right? And you're just doing your duty for the higher benefit of everybody else. So now you've completely taken yourself out of the equation. And that's the difference, right? We can act out of duty when ourself is in the equation, and that's still good. That's still, but now when you're actually renounced, you've completely taken yourself out of the equation. You're renounced of what it means to you or what it doesn't, right? You're completely detached and you're just doing it for the purpose of the welfare of the world. And this is better than just renunciation because it's benefiting the world, right? It's setting an example for the world. And this is a really high level. So when we talk about the fear, desire, duty, love, we can climb up all of those things when we still have material desires, right? We can engage in relationships out of fear, out of desire, out of duty. We're in this reciprocal relationship because it is collaborative and we're getting something out of it. But when we get to this point of renunciation, when we get to this point where we're completely detached, but we're still acting out of duty, that's completely selfless, right? That's for the real benefit of the world. We've taken ourselves out of the equation. And in that, we're liberated, right? We're liberated from our material attachments. And we're really connected with God at a much higher level. But it's a progression. Right? It's a progression. And wherever you are, you can make progress, and you will make progress if you're sincere. But overall, Krishna is saying that even if you're at the highest level, right, even if you're ready to renounce, you can act at that lower level. You can still act out of duty. You can still renounce the world, but better to act in the world and set an example. And that's the ultimate goal that Krishna is communicating here. So that's this section on renunciation. That's all that I was going to cover today. Does anybody want to share anything about that? Any reflections? Anything you want to add?
I'll add something. Good morning.
Good
You know,
morning.
good morning. I was thinking as you were speaking, there is another parallel in the biblical text that says, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things will be added unto you." And it's inviting you to give your attention fully and wholly to your love of God, your thinking about God, and then there's no need for you to think about the material aspects you've left that attention, but it also allows you to be given everything without
Mm.
thought or consideration. So you're no longer striving. You've moved from the striving, and your action is motivated from love. That's what I was hearing. Thank you for the lesson.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's really beautiful. And it's such a tall order for us to be completely detached, like completely like, I'm just going to rely on God for my food and my retirement and like all of these things that we kind of try to prepare for. But we can start by doing it on smaller scales, right? We can start by maybe when we see that we're really kind of trying to be the controller of a certain circumstance or situation or even conversation, right? If we can kind of try to practice a little bit more of detachment, maybe letting things go, right? That's something that I'm working on that I need to work on this year that I just kind of uncovered is like, okay, people are thinking things that aren't true, or maybe sometimes I feel misunderstood. Like, hey, I'm just gonna let that go. I'm just gonna let that go without trying to get overly involved, trying to control it in a way that gets me so entangled, right? And just trusting that God is gonna sort that out. Right? How can we depend on God a little bit more in our lives and in our relationships without trying to just kind of insert ourselves in a way that we become even more entangled or even more attached that, maybe bring out lower levels of us, of our consciousness. Right? So we can start small. And then what happens is as we see God's hand in these things, we start to develop faith and faith builds and we're able to do it on larger and larger scales, right? Whereas before we thought that we needed all of this security to feel okay, we can rely a little bit more on God and say, I'm going to make this decision because it's more in line with my values and principles. And I'm not really sure what's on the other side, but God's always been there for me before, and my life is in God's hands, right? And that's how we progress towards this, kind of North Star, kind of this high goal of detachment, just little by little. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Lisa. It's beautiful. I love the other traditions, and these principles are the same. Dana Kay, I see that you're off mute. Do you have something to share with us? Okay. Does anybody else want to share anything today? Narayani, please share.
I can't find the hand up thingy. So anyway, you saw me. I think it's still important, even though we should rely on God. I think it's still important to know that we still have to do our duty and that our pension doesn't come from just like putting your hands up and saying like God will provide. It's kind of like a balance of like, well, I'm supposed to do something in this world because we cannot like exist without doing anything. Um, Something else I wanted to say that I mean, when I was traveling, I was in England because of several reasons, and Kesha for me, he gave this. There was this big event on Gita Jayanti. I mean, it was not the actual Vedic date, Gita Jayanti, but it was an event where he explains not every single chapter. The last 2 years he did every single chapter. This year he did like he put chapters together with themes. Um, um, but he often says things like he shows like how the world thinks, how like so to say normal people think, and depending on like how you grow up. I mean, I changed how I see the world with those Vedic teachings. And sometimes when he says like, "Oh, the world thinks so and so," but then Krishna says so and so, and then he twists just a word. Um, then I catch myself thinking like, oh, I used to think like that. So for the third chapter, he actually said, the world thinks that spiritualists don't own anything, but actually they are not owned by anything. And
Mm.
this relates to what you said earlier that a fully spiritual person is so detached and he doesn't need anything, and it doesn't need any reciprocation, doesn't need any awe and reverence or whatnot, because he's so fully self-satisfied. And it's sometimes funny to see like how Keshav Swami is presenting those single chapters or those single topics, and seeing like, oh, that's so true, that it's often so misunderstood. Um, that people think like a fully spiritual person is does has no possessions or so. A person may have some possessions, but is not really like doesn't really need that so much. It's not
Yeah.
owned by, that's I find this really fascinating. And this relates to what you said earlier.
Yeah, that and that principle that if we do have a lot, if we are fortunate to have a lot of opulence, that's okay. But the thing is, again, like you said, not being attached to it in our mind and using it in the service of God, whatever we have, using it in the service of God and not being attached to it. And that difference, that subtlety in the mind is where the entire difference exists. Yeah. And I like the other thing you said at the beginning too. What did you say at the what was your initial point? Remind me what your initial point was.
When you rely on God, you cannot not just lean back and do
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, you see that a lot of times, and that's kind of a form of premature renunciation. Like people will just be like, okay, and it's really just like irresponsibility. And you see that come out on the other side when things maybe don't go their way, and then you see that they're actually very attached, but they were really just kind of whimsical or just kind of throwing their hands up. But they're actually very detached, or they were actually very attached, or they have like dependents, they have people that count on them, and they're just kind of ignoring that responsibility. So yeah, I like that you pointed that out. That's kind of a form of premature renunciation, just kind of running away. But this is different. This is not something that can be faked. It's when you literally understand what could happen on the other side. You understand that if you're not going to work to get food, you may not have food, and that you're okay with that. Like that's a much higher order than just kind of faking it. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
And just if I may dovetail on what you just said, and if you have done, as you said, moved up the scale of renunciation, it would actually be impossible for you not to have. And that goes back to the seek ye first idea, because if you're truly a renunciant, then, or if that's the way you say that, that you would then be given everything that you needed out of the energy that you're putting in, because it's
Mm,
impossible to give and not receive. So if you're giving fully, then you must receive fully, because that's the promise and the guarantee of living the spiritual life. You just, as Narani just said so beautifully, you may not own anything in the way that people are thinking about it, but you're not owned by anything. Love that. But you are also a recipient of the goodness, because that's what you're putting in. And so you receive as you give.
mm, wow. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for saying that, because what I just said before that was very like I'm the controller kind of mentality, kind of like this may not happen because I don't see it or because I don't understand it or because I can't control it. But when you get to that level of consciousness that we're talking about, that is what you experience, what you just said, where you're so your consciousness is so um, kind of intertwined with God. Like God is just infused. You're infused in God consciousness that you have that level of trust and that level of faith, and that's the reality of it. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Yeah. So these are tall orders, and this is again not places that this could be lifetimes. This could take lifetimes to get to. But again, we can practice it little by little in our day by the choices that we make in our relationships, in our conversations, in our lives, in our careers, right? We can see these things pop up And we can make a choice maybe just to have a little bit more faith, lean into God a little bit more, to evolve our consciousness a little bit more. And in that we can make incremental progress to this level of self-realization where the ultimate love and happiness and fulfillment exists. So thank you all for coming and for sharing. And hopefully I'll see you on Monday at 7:30.
I thought I saw Neil's hand up.
Oh, why am I not seeing these hands? That's so strange. Neil, please share.
It's just gonna, like maybe I'm on the wrong path here, but I feel sometimes I feel so privileged, in that I can go to a symphony, it costs money, or go to a performance and it costs money. And here I am in an audience of all these people who are all appreciating what's happening on the stage. And there's a connection, I feel, of the divine between the performers who are, this is what their dream is. This is what they aspire to do, to be in front of people singing and dancing and playing their violin, and they're connecting to me. And I feel that that's a divine connection. We're all one. And that's a gift from God to be able to be there with people I don't know, but we're all clapping together. We're all beating our foot together. We're all smiling at the performance together. As is this group here, we're all one together. If I didn't have a computer and an internet connection, I wouldn't be with you, and yet I am, and it warms my heart. So uh, I have these things. I'm privileged to have these things, and I did take action to be able to get them. Uh, it wasn't always the purest thing that I was working for companies that were exploiting employees or whatever, and clients, and yet I was also benefiting from it. So I don't know. I think sometimes I feel like I can have it all. I can have this amazing spiritual connection. Why not have it all? Why not have the spiritual connection? Why not feel close to the divine? And um, and also at times just be in the woods, looking at the trees and loving that. Uh, yeah, that's a so.
Hmm. Thank you, Neil. Neil's just such a big heart, such a light. Thank you for sharing all your love with us all the time. Yeah, the best things in life are free. Isn't that so true? The best things in life are free. Like this authentic connection, seekers, like authentic connection with God, with each other. If it's going to be authentic, it's going to be free, right? So thank you all for being here and for sharing that energy, that intention. Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Yes, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. See you guys
Thank
Monday.
you. Happy New Year.